Hello everybody, and thanks for coming back to the channel. This is the RedPawz EV800Pro goggles. The visor is detachable. It has your 5 bands in all 8 channels, auto search, dual antenna diversity, RP SMA connections, 854 by 480 screen, and a DVR. It has a 2000 milliamp 1S battery inside. Without the antennas, it weighs 376.9 grams. The antennas weigh 35.3 grams. It comes with a right-hand circular polarized antenna and a patch antenna, an audio cable, a USB cable for charging, a USB power brick for charging, a 2-page instruction sheet, and a pretty nice little carrying case. So even though RedPawz is the brand here on the front, we've seen this goggle before in the EV800 from eSheen. But this one has a DVR, which is a little bit different. I think there's also another feature. The EV800 also doesn't have dual antennas. And when they ship theirs, they also ship them with 2 of the linear rubber ducky antennas, which is okay. You know, we kind of expect to see that anymore. And that goggle is the one I'm comparing it to. I don't have one to do a direct comparison, but it's the same form factor. It's currently on sale for $54, and this one's about $75. But that one does not have a DVR. That's kind of the big point of this one has a DVR. I like the plastic soft touch here. It's nice. It feels good. Although I will say on the face side of it, it seems to have trouble sticking. I pressed it down there. It comes off relatively easy. I've been kind of gentle with it. I don't want it to come down. But that plastic feels good. It's sturdy, and you can see that that's a pretty severe grade away, but I really didn't notice that in the goggles when you're inside looking down. What I did notice was this giant cutout here in the nose. So if you're like me and your nose kind of doesn't fill this space, you get light leak, and you'll probably want to put some foam or some other material in here to kind of block that off, because it is distracting. You do get used to it when you're in flight, but when you're taking off, I noticed it a lot. I had a hard time focusing on the image. I kept kind of seeing that light and kept wanting to look down through it. But that will depend upon your experience. The magnification lens they have in here is pretty good. I wear glasses, and I could use these goggles just fine. Let me get my glasses here. Unless you have very small glasses, you're not going to get them in there. My glasses are filthy too, by the way. So if your prescription is very strong, I'm not certain these are going to work. My prescription's pretty light. I just need it for distance viewing. I can use quite a few of these goggles as long as the magnification lens isn't too close to my eyes, or there's not enough enough distance away from the lens. You know how they play with all those things. Like the ones I couldn't use would be the VR006. They were just too close to my face. I couldn't get those in focus. But these I could focus just fine. So if your vision is like mine, it'll work. If your vision is normal, it'll definitely work. The straps also, you know, this design's been around. There's nothing really to catch you out about the physical design. The weight doesn't come down on your nose, obviously, because there's no way. Well, no way. It's very unlikely that this is going to rest on your nose. Even if you put some foam in there, it's probably going to rest pretty light, because that is a very big cavity there. They do this unique kind of cheek resting placement, and that did not bother me at all. Especially, you know, I've been spending a lot of my time flying with Fat Shark goggles, and I thought this might make me a little bit crazy, but it really didn't bother me. This material's nice and soft. It compresses very well, so this design doesn't bother me at all, and it seemed to fix to my face just fine. I keep seeing little light gaps. Are you seeing that too? One downside of being able to separate these two pieces is that when you get them apart, you may have to clean this, so you're going to need a microfiber cloth or maybe some compressed air in order to be able to get the dust out of there. But you do have access to it, unlike other goggles where you have to do disassembly in order to get to that side of the lens in order to clean it. The buttons on these, they feel good. They don't feel like they're fragile, or you're going to push them in, or they're going to break or anything like that. When you're in the goggles, you don't really see anything around the framing. That sometimes I notice with different goggles is that sometimes you notice the framing around the picture when you're in the goggles. With this one, you don't notice that. I do worry about these little bits, because this is your sliding mechanism. It goes up in there and it slides tight, breaking. But you know, I haven't had any troubles in the weeks that I've had them. There isn't any light leak that I've noticed around this cut edge, so they've designed that well. Now we've got our battery button here, and this tells you if you're charging. If it's red, you're charging. If it's green, it's full. There also appears to be a reset button, so if it locks up or something, you can take a paper clip and poke it down through that hole. Here's our micro SD card. Then this gets us into our menu and our power. This is our function. This is our DVR. Whether it's recording video, you long press it, and you get a red dot on the screen to record video. And then if you want to take a picture, you just short press it. And you can take a picture while you're recording a DVR. I don't know how you'd really do that in function. If you're doing fixed wing stuff and you have time with one hand to reach up and tap the button, or you're sitting on a tripod, because it does mount to a tripod. If you're sitting on a tripod, you might have time to lift a hand and push that down. The search function, in my experience, works very well. In the vehicles I flew it with, it found the channel that I used every time. It does save the channel, so you don't have to scan every time. So you have one channel you use often, it will be on that channel the next time you come to it. Let's turn it on. I'm going to turn on a vehicle so that we can kind of see the screen here, although I'm going to put a cap on the lens so that we can see the menu here real quick. So now with it on, we can see that we've got a machine connected to it, and it does have an OSD. It gives you some idea of how the screen appears. We still have some static, and I've got the lens cap on the camera. So we've got our clock up here. We've got the icon for the SD card, and then next to that we've got an icon for the battery. There is no audible alert when your battery gets low, of course, because this stuff is always on screen. So if you did set the goggles down and you left them off, you might left them on, you might come back to them with a depleted battery. Then we've got our date, month, and year. We've got our channel, and we've got, I think that is an RSSI, or our signal strength. I don't know how true that is. I haven't actually noticed that change. But let's jump into the menu. You can see we've got a little menu here, and this toggles the menu on and off. These function buttons, or the function and the recording button, they move us up and down, and the band channel button selects. Let's jump down into, I don't know what split screen would do for us. I suppose if you're playing back and maybe using a receiver, I don't think you can do that. The instructions are so brief that you don't get a really good idea what that does. There's no input, so we can't, use an external receiver, and you can't use two, so I really don't know what split screen is for. Maybe you can tell me if you know what split screen on a set of goggles might be used for. Please leave that in the section down below. Loop recording, by default it's set to, I think it was 3 minutes, and I changed that to 10. So we go back, go down, we have volume because we can get audio through the goggles. We have our audio port, where'd it go? Right over here. Takes the typical jack, and it does come with one of these as well. So we've got the volume, then we've got our date stamp. You can go into that and look on, off. Video parameters, you can change those. Soft, normal, auto, and strong. Then this is where you can change the brightness. I think where they have it set is pretty good. I didn't think it was all blown out when I was in the goggles. And this is where we set our time and date. Obviously, I've already done that. So we've got auto power off. You can take that and change it to those selections. It doesn't have what you see on screen as the only selections. It's not as though it scrolls through a list. It's not quite that fancy. Then, of course, we've got language. This formats your SD card. And then this resets to the default settings. And then this one shows us the version, and you can take a look at the version I'm running. So let's go back and let's find a file to play. So this is a view of how it pulls up all the different media files on your card, and then you can select a file to play. I'm going to go ahead and just play. I'm going to move over to this one over here, I think, and play that one. When you're watching this, you can go fast forward as we start our flight here. But say you wanted to go faster, you see the 2x down there, and then the 4x, and then to make it slow back down to normal speed, you hit the button next to it, so forward, slower. Okay, that gives you a pretty good overview of the goggles, kind of my thoughts and experience with it so far. Let me stop this. Now it's going backwards time too. Stop. Okay, there we go. I've got it paused. And we do have a little pause icon. Hopefully you can see that. I do think the camera is washing out the colors. I think the colors are a little bit richer in here. But this also gives a representation. The DVR, when I put that on screen, it is very true to what I saw in the goggles and what we see here. It does look this way through the goggles as you see it on the DVR. It is not as though the DVR changes the color correction or something like that. Now, I set up a test for reception because comfort and functions and features, those are all fine and well. But we need to know, because we're locked into these receivers, they're built into the unit, we need to know how well these receivers work. I say receivers, how the receiver works, because this has two antennas but just one receiver. And to make sure this test was relatively even, I didn't want to test my Fat Shark goggles. I didn't think that was fair because I've got the LaForge module inside of that. And the LaForge module costs just about as much as these goggles do themselves. So I did not use these antennas in my test because I couldn't keep that fair. What I did do was I put on a pagoda like this with an adapter. And there can be a little bit of loss through those adapters. Typically, you don't want to use those to maximize your signal strength. But in this case, because it's RPSMA, I had to do that. And I also have a NickburnsRC patch that I put on the goggles. So these were affixed to the goggles, and then I went out flying, and the patch was not pointed in the direction of the yard where I go down into the neighbor's yard closer to the creek, and I just kind of sit down behind the trees. Actually, I put these on wrong. The pagoda was over here, and the patch was over here. So these were the opposite of what we see here. But anyways, I compare them to these goggles, which are the KDS Kylin Vision goggles. These are some pretty impressive goggles, but as far as comfort, fit, and form, they're very, very similar. I had to kind of do a mod to get a DVR on them, and I am using the eSheen Pro DVR. This DVR does a bit of cropping on the image, so you might see a difference there. I do line them up fairly well in the footage that you're going to see. As far as comparing this goggle, I'll put a card up here to this goggle review. I've had these for a while. There are a few pitfalls with these goggles as well. I think the image actually in this goggle is easier to focus on, at least for me. There's less light leak because they did the nose different. They kind of made it curved or contoured. The power button over here doesn't actually turn the system off. It is a low power, so I hacked in a button over here. It's a momentary button. If I did that again, I'd put in a toggle switch because putting the battery in and out is kind of fussy. You can see it uses a JST in there, but there's all sorts of information available to these. These still come in somewhere between $70 and $90, so they're not cheap by any stretch, but they are a good goggle, and I think what you're going to find in the review is the reception on these is really good, and that's the downfall of the EV800Pros, is the reception is not that good. To make sure everything was as fair as I could be, I used the two pagoda antennas that I have that are the same, and then I did the test. I actually did the test like 6 times. I marked the antenna with that circle, and then I swapped the antennas. I ran the test again, and I swapped them back. I couldn't tell any difference in the video, so I'm pretty certain that both antennas are performing about the same, or it's so close that I can't tell the difference. If anything, the EV800Pros should have an advantage in this test. So let's take a look at that footage now. I've got a still here so you can get your pause finger ready, so you can hit pause and take a look at that image. But now we're going to get going with the flight, and as you can see here, the colors, I think, on the EV800Pro, that the DVR did a nice job, I think, with the colors. I think the eSheen Pro DVR on my KDS goggles kind of tones things down a little bit. And that may bother you, it may not, but I'm just trying to fly in a path. I'm not doing a range test. I'm actually trying to see what our reception is like just by kind of flying around. And I think I have the video synced up fairly well, but here's where it starts to get shaky. As you can see, we go black and white several times on the EV800s, and it gets pretty bad. That's pretty unflyable from time to time. And we're down below ground level now when we're down here. We go over behind this chain link fence for a moment as well. I am not wearing the EV800s at this time. I'm wearing the Fat Shark goggles, and I can tell you that this is how it appears in the goggles. The DVR has a pretty good representation of what you see in the goggles with the breakup. So it's not the DVR that has done something to make the picture look that way. That's actually a pretty good representation of the picture. We make up a couple passes, close in, see if what kind of breakup we get. Go up high here with the little float over the house. Even there you can see we get a fair bit of breakup. And you can see some stuttering in the DVR. The DVR seems to be implemented pretty well. It records at 30 frames a second, which I thought was good. The file is, as you see on screen, 720 by 576. So the bit rate's pretty nice. I think the DVR is probably the highlight, but unfortunately the DVR is connected to the receivers that aren't so good. So we sit down behind this tree a little bit more, see how our interference is. Well, I'm going to be quiet. You can watch the rest of this, or you can jump ahead a minute or so, and we'll wrap up at the desk. Unfortunately, as much as I really wanted these goggles to work, I think that reception is really holding it back. It doesn't matter what sort of functions or features you might have or how comfortable or clear the image might be if the reception's pretty poor. And in my opinion, that wasn't very good. You know, we're not a long ways out. Yeah, it's tough, but I got 3 other sets of goggles here that don't cost this much that work as far as getting that reception. It seems to be that the receiver that they have in here just isn't very good. That's unfortunate. This is RedPawz branded, but I probably won't have a EV800Pro review because if anybody asks me, I'll probably turn them down. But you can extrapolate this information, I think, pretty safely into any EV800Pros, or I think there's a D version out there or something too. Basically, look for these functions, features, this look, and you can extrapolate this information into those products as well. I could be wrong. They could correct something with software. Something could come down the pipe and they fix something, but I'm hesitant there. So unfortunately for me, I think if you've got these, I hope that they serve you well. I don't wish you to have a bad experience. I want everybody to enjoy their time flying in FPV. But unfortunately, if you're looking for these goggles, or you're looking at shopping for these goggles, I wouldn't suggest purchasing these goggles. They're close. They're so close, but that big piece of reception is really missing. And there are a few things more important in FPV than reception. I would maybe recommend the go and do your homework. The VRD2s, they seem to be decent if you had good vision. If you wear glasses, you're really reduced to have to either mod something like this. I know some people did some mods to the KDS vision goggles. I know I've done this mod, but they actually did mods where they would get reading glasses and they would mount them in here. So if your prescription's fairly strong for your glasses, that's a whole different case. You may have to actually get diopters and put them in Fat Shark goggles. So you might really want to spend more time doing your research if your vision is exceptionally weak. Unfortunately, not a nice product review, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes you get one that you hope the best for, but it doesn't turn out that way. And you can also kind of see how the grease from our fingers just gets all over these things and kind of ruins that nice feel to it. So that's my review of the RedPawz EV800Pro goggles. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave that in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.